I'm not going to claim any old school points for this, but Battletoads on the NES was unjustifiably difficult. It's beatable, I've seen people do it, but honestly it's something I'll never achieve because there are parts that are so soul-destroying that I feel a little lessened by the whole experience. Anyway, despite whether it's become so famous these days through memes or some other such notoriety, it's objectively not really that special of a game. The best, and also worst, part of that game was the two-player mode, even if just so you can twat your mate around for a bit. I don't think the game's beatable as two-player, there's supposedly a glitch that stops you doing so, but it was definitely more enjoyable than playing on your own. The Game Boy version did away with this despite the link cable capabilities, and as a result the storyline had to be slightly altered. You can no longer choose between the three characters, but instead control their intrepid leader Zitz, the most boring one, and of course you have to rescue the other two. The first level looks pretty familiar as you're trying not to fall off a cliff top while punching hogs and hands with billy clubs. The camera action is something quite noticeable, as you can quite often have to go over to the right hand side of the screen a fair way to get it to move, but the way it does is quite fluid feeling. That's the best way I can describe it. The fighting stages are usually the strongest part of any Battletoads game, and the lack of them was a large part of what the NES game suffered from. Too many silly platforming and speed tunnel levels where rote learning and quick reflexes were more important than being able to stomp ass. The Game Boy version has those, but to a lesser extent, and the game is stronger for it. The controls are really good in these brawl levels, with responsive and fair movement and the ability to do a proper jumping attack. This move really is the key to getting anywhere, as a lot of enemies don't seem to have an answer to it. As mentioned, there are the occasional speed tunnel levels, but they're nowhere near as brutal. You get a visual hint of what's coming up in terms of obstacles in a reasonable amount of time, and there's none of this having to connect exactly correctly with ramps or anything like that. Oh, you'll still die quite a bit, I'm sure, but it's actually doable. None of that despair of thinking that you'll never make it. The speed sections aren't as long, and they're usually found in between shoot-'em-up sections. The graphics are incredible for a Game Boy game, with the hilariously exaggerated fists and boots while fighting, and Zitz can grow a pair of ram's horns to do a charge attack. The pictures in between stages are right out of a comic book. Some of the bosses look legitimately menacing in these images, and are actually mirrored in-game, which often is not the case. Of course, the music is as good as any Battletoads title, which is to say it's excellent. Heavy, fast, catchy, everything you want to match the 90s radical attitude of the era. There's a pretty annoying section, I think it's level 5, where you're running down these twisty diagonal passages away from this massive boulder that looks like a brain. It's tough as nails, you have to stay out of its reach for a good couple of minutes with not a lot of response time. It's kind of a buzzkiller, just when you thought they weren't going to include a stupid level like that. If you can make it through, then you're onto another Battletoads staple, abseiling a deep vertical chasm avoiding spikes and eagles and rats on balloons. It's not that long a level, thankfully, and once you reach the foot, you fight this grotesquely obese rat with a mohawk. It's quite tricky, but the game doesn't let up. A nightmarish platforming stage with rotating scythe things is followed up with a firefight with Robo-Manus, which involves Zitz strapped to a jetpack, blasting upwards through a mechanical hallway, firing rockets at anything and everything, until you come to a door. The hardest thing about this stage is the very strict time limit. Get to the door, and you're on to the final boss battle. I'm not going to ruin it for anyone skilled enough to get this far, suffice to say that it will hurt you. You can do it, I promise. Thanks so much for watching this video. The Kickstarter for the book is now live. Check the link in the description for how you can back the project and be the first to get your hands on the Portable Power Encyclopedia, featuring more than 900 Game Boy game reviews and a whole wealth of useful information on the world's favorite handheld console. See you later on.